Hey, so I think that would be time to get started. Now, I saw something really helpful and motivating on the chat, so I'm just going to put that on the screen here, and hopefully that will be helpful for everyone before we get started. So take a look at that. Seems like a really good idea. I think that was Megs from Medic&Me. Before her first Oski looked in the mirror, said you're gonna smash this. So same idea here. Positive self-affirmations. You think you can do it, you're gonna be able to do it. That's the way
Right.
to go.
Just to quickly say something on this, my biggest advice would be like for the Oskies that I've literally done the very best on, I did a lot worse when I was really stressed, worked until the minute I went in, and actually having the confidence in your own abilities to be like the night before, I've done everything I can do. I've smashed my preparation. I am in such a good place. Guys, we actually had 700 people turn up, and you guys are the ones who were sat here on the Saturday learning the techniques. So you guys are going to smash it and have the confidence the night before your exam to say, I've got this. I don't need to do any more work. And then you'll get up on the day, relax, chill out, go for a walk, be calm. And when you sit down, you'll be so in game mode. Your brain will have stepped out the UCAT world for like 12 hours, 16 hours, whatever. And it means I got this. I mean, my UCAT was like 7 years ago. But for Oskies, when I do this, I honestly went in with such a clear head and did so much better. So my personal advice is really to like have the confidence in yourself to say, I've done enough, because actually that then breeds confidence in your performance as well. I don't know what Otis has to say about that. Oh yeah, and also look in the mirror and go, I am gonna smash this in your head 3 times. And my final tip is wear nice clothes. Wear smart clothes that you feel good in. Be a boss. That helped me a lot. I mean, wear trackies if you want to as well. But for me, like like feeling good about myself when I went in really helped me. So yeah, there's a few little manifestation tips for you there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean, especially about the panicking, revising the night before, doing mocks the night before, really not what you need to do, especially for something like UCAD, because you're not cramming, you're not memorizing content, you're practicing skills. So it's not like maybe certain exams where you've got a whole book to finish and maybe you can do that the night before. Okay, not this. You're practicing skills. It's not going to be helpful to spend hours and hours the night before exhausting yourself. So maybe like look over some SJT, look over your reflections, that's it. But the day before your exam, just relax. No more studying needs to be done. You're going to work hard over the next couple of weeks, and that's it. So relax when it gets to the exam. Now, I think we should get started straight into some decision making because there's so many question types and we need to be done by 4:30. So, for your decision making, we have a total of like 7 different question types. And in these, and by the way, people are asking some quite general questions on the chat. We will have these in the Q&A, okay? So for now, let's try and do some decision making. And I'll make sure to take these at like 4 o'clock when we get to the Q&A. So in decision making, we've got these 7 different question types. So we have yes, no questions, we have logic puzzles, we have arguments, Venn diagrams, probabilities. And the order of these questions in the UCAT exam is always exactly the same. So your 29 questions are always going to follow this kind of pattern. And if you've done any mocks on the UCAT website or on like a different question bank, they're always going to follow this kind of structure. So you've got 4 of these yes no questions. Then you got some logic puzzles. Then you have some arguments. Then you have some more yes no questions. Then you have Venn diagrams. Then you have probabilities. Always the same structure. And because you know that this is the structure, you're going to use that to your advantage. Because out of these questions, we know that some of them are like a lot easier than others. So, for example, a probabilities question, if you've done any of them already, you'll know usually take you way less time than, say, a logic puzzle question. But the probabilities are right at the end, questions 29, questions 28, so on. So if you don't manage your time well, you might end up missing out some of these easier questions here. So super important, bear that in mind. Probabilities are arguments and Venn diagrams on the whole quite a bit easier than like logic puzzles. So these ones, make sure you leave enough time for. And if you find that any logic puzzles are very tricky, like they have maybe 4 or 5 individuals in and they got loads of categories you have to match up, then one of those questions maybe you want to skip and come back to rather than spending ages at the start. And for the people who are talking about patterns document, we'll have a look at that afterwards as well. So for your logic puzzles, and that was about AR, so we'll leave that for now. For the logic puzzles, you'll find that some of them are quite long and they can definitely take up a lot of your time. And they're right at the start of your subtest. So if you find any of these tricky logic puzzles, don't let them waste your time at the start. Now, some people also say, well, these yes no questions are long as well. But you got to remember, these yes no questions are worth 2 marks each. So all the other questions are worth 1 mark, but these 9 yes no questions, so 4 plus 5, they're worth 2 marks each. And so out of a total of 38 marks, so that's 20 marks for the 1 markers and 18 marks for the 9 2 markers. So out of total 38 marks, 18 of them are for the yes no questions. So if there's anything you want to practice and you're struggling with, yes no is probably where to start. It's a really important one to prepare because it's worth so many marks. And in terms of whether you skip them, maybe you skip some of the harder ones, but I would not try and skip all of them. Reason being just because they're worth 2 marks each. So if you skip anything, the one with the worst kind of time to marks ratio is going to be your logic puzzles, and especially because they're right at the start. So beware of the logic puzzles. And like I saw Frank put in the chat, don't just skip it, flag it first. So Alt F and then Alt N so that you can easily come back to it if there's time at the end. Now, what we're going to spend a lot of time on for today is these yes no questions. Now, these yes no questions, we get them in 2 different types. You get the ones at the start, which are called logic-based syllogisms, and we get the ones in the middle that are your interpreting information. Now, we treat them in completely different ways. The logic-based syllogisms, you read the passage first. So you'll only have like 1 or 2 lines. You'll read it, try and make sense of it, think about the most extreme cases and possibilities, and then pick the answer options afterwards. So first, make sense of the passage. And when you're practicing, you might even want to make a little diagram, like a flowchart, to help you memorize, help you understand. But for these ones in the middle, which are the yes no called interpreting information, the clue is in the name. They give you tons of information and you have to interpret it. So what that means is it's not really going to be a good idea for you to spend ages reading the passage first. For these ones, you're going to treat it just like verbal reasoning. So you're going to read the question and then look for the relevant sentence and use that to answer the question. So for these ones in the middle, slightly different approach. These are longer questions. You do not draw Venn diagrams for them. These ones at the start, you can draw flowcharts and Venn diagrams for. And we're going to take a look at some of the questions that are better for flowcharts, some of the questions that are better for Venn diagrams. But these ones in the middle, remember, not like that, just like verbal reasoning. And you wouldn't draw a diagram for a verbal reasoning question, so you don't draw it for one of these. Now, the other difference is for these ones, logic-based questions, you want to treat them a bit like your like extreme cases. So you want to look for why might it be no? What is the extreme possibility I've not thought about? But for these ones in the middle, which are the yes, no with the data, you're allowed to infer a little bit. So even if something is not 100% certain, if it's supported by the data, you are allowed to do some inference. And that's quite a big difference. So let's start with some of these syllogisms you get at the start. And these syllogisms you get at the start, one good thing to notice is if they're worth 2 marks and you got 5 things to do. So say we have 5 ones to work out, yes or no. If you get 4 of them right, you get 1 mark. If you get 5 of them right, you get 2 marks. But whether you get 3 right, 2 right, or 1 right, you still get 0 marks. So if you're not sure about any of them, don't work out 3 of them, because if you get 3 out of 5, that's no more marks than if you get 1 out of 5. So if you're guessing them, then guess all 5. And if you're doing them, then do all 5. But don't do like 3 and leave out 2 because there's no point. You get the same number of marks. So let's take a look to start off with at the short logic ones. And for the short logic ones, we're looking at extreme possibilities. So if we had A animals are faster than B animals, and B animals are faster than C animals. And the question was, only A is faster than B, That's actually going to be a no. So even though here it looks like A is at the top, the reason why that's going to be a no is because you could have a D. And you have to think about possibilities outside the scope of the question. So even if it only tells you about A, B, and C, you have to think about D. There are potentially other possibilities. Now, that's only the case for these short ones at the start. For the later ones in the middle, you don't really worry about possibilities outside the question. And the other thing to keep in mind is take a look at your language. So is it like all, always versus might, may, and could? This is the same idea for every section. We said it for VR. We're saying it for DM. It's always the same, not just for UCAT, any sort of multiple choice exam. So we start off with this one. And for this kind of question, the best approach would be to draw some kind of flow chart. So this is not a Venn diagram question. There's a very specific type of question that a Venn diagram works for, and this is not one of them. So we'll take a look at some of them later. But for this one, the way I would approach it is to read the passage first, because it's only two sentences. It'll take a second. And make a little diagram to think about what you've been told. So we have a mixed gender school. Start off with the biggest categories. And so we have male and we have female. Then we know that all students have to be at least two foreign languages. So both male and female, we know, are going to be 2+. Now we've been told that no boy studies all three. So if no boy studies all three and he has to be 2+, then he can only ever be 2. So we know that males have to be 2, and we know that females just have to be more than 2. So they could be 2, or they could be 3. But keep in mind, we don't actually know whether any of them are 2 or whether any of them are 3. So we don't really know about the distribution. We just know that it's 2+. So we've made that diagram, we've had to think about it, then we move on to the questions. Now, what I don't recommend is that you make this diagram in the real thing, but it is a good idea to make this diagram when you're practicing until you get them right. And once you start getting 5 out of 5, then maybe you stop making the diagram, because by that point, you'll start to see it in your head anyway. So loads of people giving answers. If anyone else would like a couple seconds to think about it, just solve and direct message to start off with. Okay, so loads of answers rolling in. That's good. So to start off with, let's go for the first one. So no girl studies only French. Now, if we look at our Venn diagram, not Venn diagram, this is a flow chart, we can see that none of the girls are at 1. They have to be 2 or 3. So we know that no girl can study only French. That's got to be a yes. Next one. All of the boys study 2 foreign languages. We look at our male, we've got the number 2. So that follows. That's a yes. Third one. More girls than boys study foreign languages. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one. And the reason why it's kind of tricky is because we know that all of the guys study 2 and all of the girls could be 2 or 3, but that tells you nothing about the number of girls studying languages. So what we are talking about is how many languages each individual girl studies. That's not about how many girls there are who are studying languages. So this question has actually got nothing to do with our diagram and passage. And that means we can't conclude about it. So it's going to be a no. Now, for the next one, we have more girls than boys study 3 foreign languages. Now, remember again for this one, we could not conclude that there are any girls who study 3. So what we said is that the girls are either 2 or 3. Now, we don't know if there are any girls who study 3. And because we don't have any evidence to conclude, that's something that's not clear. For this one, we have to say no. Now, if the question said more girls than boys could study 3 foreign languages, then the answer would be yes, because it's possible that there are maybe 5 or 6 girls that study 3 foreign languages. But without the word could, we don't have enough information to say that for sure, and so we have to say no. So always saying no for these questions unless you have information to prove it for sure. And same thing for the last one. So at least one boy and at least one girl study the same pair of foreign languages. I mean, maybe. And if it had the word could, then it would be a yes. But it's possible that it's the other way around. Like it might be that the guys are all French and German. And it might be that the girls are all German and Spanish. And so in that case, they wouldn't be the same pairs because they would all be different. So for these questions, unless we have evidence to say that they are 100% true, and in this case, we don't have that evidence because it could be otherwise. In that case, you're going to have to say no. So the first two are yes, and the next three are no. So are people happy with those? So Amira, why is four not yes as no boy studies three? Because we don't know whether any girls study three either. So just because boys don't study three doesn't mean girls do. You can't infer the reverse. No boy studies three, we got no information about the girls. So it could be that both the boys and the girls are two. So yes, yes, no, no, no. Yep. Any questions about that or happy? Yeah, Adam, very good. So, Adam, your point is very valid in regard to the third question, which is that more girls than boys study foreign languages. And the fourth question, more girls than boys study three foreign languages. I mean, we have no idea about the distribution of number of girls versus boys. We only know a little bit about what they study. So, keep that in mind. Now we've got different sorts of questions. Now, the kinds of questions you draw Venn diagrams for, and Khadija, yeah, you're right, that's worth 2 marks. So the kind of questions that you're going to draw these Venn diagrams for, they are only these three types. All ARB, some ARB, no ARB. These are the only ones that need Venn diagrams. None of the other questions can be done with Venn diagrams unless they boil down to one of these. So the only thing that might happen is you have like every single A is B. And well, that's the same as all A are B. Every single A is B. Or if we have no A are B, that might be the same as saying none of the A are B. None of the A are B. Same thing. Or if we had some A are B, that might be saying a few of the A are B. But in short, there are only three different types of Venn diagrams. So we're going to learn what all of them look like. And then once you've done that, you should be able to draw any Venn diagrams you need for these UCAT questions. So all ARB, no ARB, some ARB. There are only three kinds of diagrams. And anything else is just a combination of these. So to start off with, how might I draw the relationship all ARB? How might it look? So you can just put this on the chat now. You don't even need to direct message. Yeah. Circle in a circle. So all ARB, very good. Now, one thing you need to do to make these Venn diagrams level up. So the reason why this Venn diagram as it is isn't perfect is because it's actually a bit ambiguous. So circle in a circle is all good, but imagine you had A here and then you had B right on top of it. So we had A, and then directly on top of B, we had B. And here we have all A are B, and that works for this one too. We just don't have any B that are not A. So all A are B could be either of these situations. It could be this one, or it could be this one. So there's actually some ambiguity here. We don't know anything about whether all B are A. And like, for example, in this case, all the B are A. So we don't have this outside region. So whenever you draw all A are B, to make sure you've incorporated that ambiguity about all A are B, you don't know for sure, you're going to mark the outside with a question mark and the inside with a tick. So that's for all A are B. So outside with question mark, inside with tick. What that represents is the fact that you don't know anything about the B's that are A. So when you draw this diagram, you draw the question mark on the outside to say we can't make any conclusions about the outside bit, but we put a tick on the inside to say that we know for sure that there has to be someone inside A. So that's how you want to draw this Venn diagram with a tick and a question mark. And Stephanie, isn't that a Euler diagram? I honestly don't know the difference, but whatever it is, this is how you're going to draw it. So you have a tick on the inside and a question mark on the outside. Now, what you can then say is if there are any questions about the inside region. So the tick regions, you can talk about them for sure. So talk about for sure. If you've got any questions about the question mark region, you cannot conclude about them either way for the question mark region unless they have the words could, may, or might. So if we have all A are B, let's just draw that once more. Reminder what you have to do. You have a circle inside a circle for all A are B. Let's do that again. So we have the A are fully inside the B, and we know that we gotta have some A's that are inside the B, so we mark that with a tick. Now, what we don't know is whether there are any other B's. So we don't know anything about how many B's are not A. So whenever you have all A are B, you draw the relationship like this. And you don't have to figure this out on the spot, you've just learned that now. So every time you see all A are B, like all cats are red, then you put the cats on the inside and the red on the outside, all A are B. Now we can use this to work out some statements. Like for example, if I said, at least one B is A, is that talking about the tick bit or the question mark bit? Which region am I talking about? At least one B is A. That's talking about the tick bit. So that's talking about the ones that are A. So at least one B is A, we can say yes to, because that's talking about the region with the tick. So we can make a conclusion about that. The B's that are A, because that's talking about tick region. If we were to talk about a different region though, and we were to talk about at least one B is not A, what's that talking about? Yeah, that's all about the question mark region. So those are the B's that are not A. Now, these ones we can't conclude anything about, so we have to say no. Now, it would be the same if we said it the other way around. If we said no B are not A, that would also be a no. So we can't say that these people exist, but we also can't say that they don't exist. So it would be a no either way. The only time we could say yes to that is if it said at least one B could be not A. And because it's a question mark, that relates to this idea of could. So if it was at least one B could be not A, then that would be a yes. And so that's what you would draw for all these all A are B questions. Does that make sense? So when you have all A are B, you have so no B are not A. What we're saying here by no B are not A is we're saying that there's no one in this question mark region. So we're saying like not a single person is just B and not A. That's what we're saying. So we're saying that this bit on the outside doesn't exist. That's what this statement is saying. And we have to say that that's no because we don't have enough information to decide. So for your no B are not A, that's when we talk about the bit on the outside of the Venn diagram where it's just B and it's not A. And we can't conclude about that region because we don't know. Just because all A are B, we don't know anything about how many B are A. So there could be loads of people who are B and A, or there could be not very many. And so that's how we're going to draw all A are B. Now, you're right that this could be a little bit confusing without examples of like different words. So we're going to try it in the context of a question. So let's leave this for now and let's try it with the context of a question. And just before we do that, quickly have a think. What would the circle look like for no A and B? So how might no A or B look? Yeah, two separate circles. So no A or B would be two separate circles like this. And what about some ARB? What would some ARB look like? Overlap or intersection. Really good. So some ARB would look like this. And we have our A here and our B here. So we have some of the ARB. And if it's only some, it's not all, then we got to have at least one A that's not a B. So that's what some ARB is going to look like. But as you asked, we're going to do this in the context of a question rather than just randomly. So here we have an example. Skinks and iguanas are two different kinds of lizard. So first you want to figure out what is the bigger category. So in this case, bigger category might be lizard. And we know that the lizard is a type of reptile. So we're going to put lizard inside reptile. So lizard here, and we have reptile here. Now, we don't know about how many reptiles exist that are not lizards. So I've marked this area with a question mark. All that's telling you is we don't know what other things are reptiles. We know that all the lizards are reptiles, but there might be other animals that are reptiles. There might not be. We don't know. That's what I meant by the question mark. That was the question mark for all ARB. Now, inside lizard, we know that we have two different kinds, skinks and iguana. So that's just like saying no A are B. So no skinks are iguanas, and that's going to be two separate circles. So we've got two separate circles here, one for skink and one for iguana. Skink and iguana. Now, if you look at if we have any other information, we also know that all Davarzi are skinks. So these Davarzi here, we have to put them fully inside the section that skinks. So Davarzi go inside here. And what we don't know, so we're going to mark this with a question mark again, because remember, whenever you have all A or B, the outside bit is a question mark. We don't know if anything else is a skink. It might be, it might not be. So this is your question mark region again. Now, to start off with, we look at the first question. No lizards are skinks. So for that, all you need to check are there some lizards that are also skinks? So can you see that on our diagram? That there's some lizards that are also skinks? So you can see here, look, the bit in pink. This bit here, over here, are your skinks that are lizards. So no lizards are skinks. That's not true because you have this bit in orange and then this pink in pink as well. This all is skinks that are lizards. So we can't say no lizards are skinks because we can see them here. It's the circle I just drew. Now, we didn't know about these ones. These were a question mark, but we did know about these ones, the bit in pink. We know that they exist. So we can't say no lizards are skinks because we can see them here. It's the circle inside of lizards. Now, all Davarzi are reptiles. So remember I said Davarzi are this thing in pink. Are these Davarzi all inside a green rectangle? Are they all in it? What do we think? Yeah, they're all fully inside. So that's true. All the Darvazi are reptiles. The Darvazi are in the reptiles. Now we have no Darvazi are iguanas. Well, let's see. Darvazi are the bit in pink, and this is the iguanas. So is that true that there's no connection between them? Yeah, everyone correct. That's true. Now we have some reptiles are skinks. So what do we need to see? Are some of the skinks, so this circle in orange, inside the reptiles? Is that true? Yeah, that's true, because some of these reptiles are skinks, these ones here, but equally some of them are not skinks, like the iguanas. So that does follow. Some of them, a fraction of the reptiles, belong inside skinks. So that's yes. And the last thing, all skinks are Darvazi. So if we look at this circle inside a circle, and what did we say? We said we know that the Darvazi are inside the skinks, and then we put a question mark here on the outside to say that we didn't know anything about how many skinks were Darvazi. So based on that question mark, what do we think? No. Very good. So this is no. And whether or not you want to use the Venn diagram is really up to you. It's not that the Venn diagram is the main idea, it really isn't. The main idea is just understanding this point, which is that when you have all A or B, so like all Darvazi are skinks, and if this is your Darvazi, and these are your skinks, so all Darvazi and skinks, the key idea is just that we can comment on these, but we can't comment on these. That's the only reason I drew the Venn diagram, just to demonstrate that. So we know that there are definitely some Darvazi that are skinks when we have the statement all Darvazi are skinks, What we can't talk about is how many skinks are Darvazi. There might be loads, there might be all of them, there might not be very many. We can't talk about the reverse. So if it said all skinks could be Darvazi, yes, I would say yes. Birkan, you're correct. And that's because it has a question mark. So question mark means anything with the word could is going to be a yes. Now we have, would you recommend to draw it in the test? Probably not, but I would recommend it when you're practicing. And when you're practicing, you're going to start to get the hang of this. Like when you can say yes and when you can say no. So once you start to recognize the statements and you get loads of practice, you'll be able to do this in your head. And so for now, if you like the Venn diagram to help you visualize, then use it. Now, some of you might not like the Venn diagram, and in that case, you don't need to use it. That's entirely up to you. But either way, you need to make sure that you understand this bit about when you can infer the reverse and when you can't. So if we have like all A are B, you cannot say all B are A. That's not allowed because we don't know about the, say, Darvazi and the skinks, the reverse relationship. But what about if I had not B is not A? So what do we think about this one? All A are B, not B is not A. So is that a yes or a no? What do we think? Right, let's take a look. What would that be like? So we have here all A are B. All skinks are Darvazi. Okay? So now we're saying something is not B. So we have all the Darvazi are inside skinks, but this is something that's not inside skinks. So it's not inside this circle, it's somewhere over here. So this is our thing that's not B. And now we're saying, is it definitely not A? So this is our A over here. And if we have something outside, way out here, then does it also have to be not A based on your Venn diagram? Yeah, very good. That's a yes. So that's why the Venn diagram is important. Another way you might want to think about it is with a real life scenario. So if we had all clouds are white, okay? So all clouds are white. Can we say all white things are clouds? No, because I've got a packet of crisps here and that's white and that's not a cloud. So all clouds are white. We can't say all white things are clouds. What we can say is like this thing is red. It is therefore not a cloud. So if we have all clouds are white, you can't say all white things are clouds. That's wrong. But you can say not white is not a cloud. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. Less anyone want me to talk about any of these, or can we move on to a different question type? Move on. And couple more people. Move on. Okay. And yeah, like in an ideal situation, I wouldn't be trying to rush through this in like minutes for each one. These all are stuff that you're gonna have to develop over time practicing. So this is not something that me explaining in 1 minute is gonna sort. You're gonna have to practice doing this with the UCAT website. But this is just like a really quick overview at what you're looking for. And if there's anything you remember, it's this idea here, because I've seen this in so many questions. All A R B, you have to say no to all B are A, but you have to say yes to not B is not A. This is actually so, so common. And if you go on the UCAT website, you'll see that these just repeat over and over. And these are the answers for anyone who wanted them. So it's no, yes, yes, no, like we said. No, yes, 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 no. So these ones are no, these ones are yes. No, yes, 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 no. Not B and not A. Can you summarize that again? So just like we said now, let's go back to the same example. Actually, let's use a different one. All 50p coins are silver in color, okay? So all the 50p coins, any 50p coin is silver in color. Now, can I say all silver things are 50p's? No, because like you could have a pair of keys or you could have a battery. That would be silver as well. But if I say that this is not silver, then is it a 50p coin? So this is orange. Is it a 50p? So all 50p coins are silver. This thing is orange. Is it a 50p coin? What do we think? No. So that's the idea. All A are B, not B is not A. All coins are silver. Sorry, all 50p coins are silver, not 50p. Really important idea. Just like thinking about a standard Venn diagram. Sana, that's right. So just like, remember, we drew the Venn diagram. I just lost my cursor. We drew the Venn diagram. We said all A are B. So all the A are inside the B. If something is not inside the B, then it definitely can't be inside the A because the A is fully inside B. But let's move on so we don't spend too long on that. Now we have interpreting information. So for interpreting information, we do not draw any kind of diagrams. So remember, what did we say? When you've got these words here, or words that break down to these, all ARB, no ARB, some ARB, then we can draw Venn diagrams. When we don't have these words, like this one, it doesn't all break down into those words, then we draw a flowchart. Like this one is about specific languages and numbers. So this is not one of your all ARB questions. This is not going to fit into a Venn diagram. So for these kind of ones, you draw flowcharts. For these kind of ones, you might want to draw Venn diagrams if you find them useful, and that depends on you personally. Then we've got these kind of ones, interpreting information. This is just like verbal reasoning. You have to infer stuff, and you do not have to draw any kind of Venn diagram. So for these ones, the only time you don't infer stuff is when the values in units are different. So like if we have 46 and 46,000, so say in a table, it's got a bar and the bar chart goes up to 46. But if you look at the instructions in the heading, it says numbers in thousands. And the question asks you, there were 46 people who did this. Well, in that case, the answer is going to be no, because you have to look at the units, and this was in thousands. So keep that in mind. Also, make sure you're only ever making inferences about the same group of people. So if we have this graph shows 60% of scientists believe something, and the question is like 60% of people believe something, that is totally not the same thing. So just because 60% of scientists, it might not be 60% of people. So keep that in mind. Got an example here. So remember, for these ones, different approach. Question first. First read the question, then look for the information. So have a think, and then we'll talk about them. And Malik, you're right. Yes, these are the longer type yes/no questions. These are the ones that we call interpreting information. So these ones, you do not need to draw any kind of diagrams. You treat them like verbal reasoning. Read the question first, then the information. How long should we spend on them? So at the start of our like decision-making section, we had a slide on with like the timestamps for each section. And we said that for the ones at the start, the shorter yes nos, we said maybe spend about 90 seconds on each one maximum. And for some of these longer ones, maybe spend about 110, 120 seconds maximum. And that's because they're worth 2 marks each. How many data questions? Probably like 1 or 2, because you'll have like 4 or 5 altogether of these longer yes no, and most of them will be with a narrative with text in. So there'll be like 1 or 2 of these. Okay. So have a think. Please send them to me rather than putting them on the chat. And I wouldn't recommend just skipping them unless you're struggling for time. Because, like I said, there are 5 of these that worth 2 marks each. So you can't exactly skip all of the interpreting information, and you can't leave all the syllogisms because they're worth 18 out of 38 marks. Now, if you imagine you skip 18 out of 38 marks, you're going to struggle to get more than 50%. So you got to answer at least some of these. Maybe skip any that are very tricky, though. But the ones that you might want to skip more of are like your logic puzzles. So I wouldn't skip all of the 2 markers, maybe some of the harder ones. So let's have a think about this. Now, the two that are kind of hard, I thought personally, were 2 and 5. So we start with number 1. Candidate B fared better in terms of getting a response. Well, let's see here. Candidate B, they've got fewer responses than candidate A every single time. So we can't exactly say that candidate B did better because they always got lower numbers of responses. So that's probably going to be a no. Now, the next one is a bit tricky. So it asks you, students felt most strongly about transport issues at the campus. So what we can see is that there's definitely data to back that up. If we look at the number of transport issues, the number of tweets they made, they were a lot more than any of the other 2 debates. Now, technically, what you could say is that doesn't necessarily mean they feel the most strongly about transport. It could just be that maybe on the day of the first debate, everyone showed up, and on the day of the third debate, they had an exam. So technically, there are actually other potential factors, but you do not need to worry about that for interpreting information. So even if some of you think, well, that's not actually a guarantee, as long as you find data supporting you, you're going to say yes for this question type. So students felt most strongly about transport. We have data to back that up because transport is the highest, so we're going to say yes, even though technically there could be other things involved as well. Now, the students became increasingly critical of candidate A. Well, let's see. The number of people saying negative things went down, and the number of people saying positive things stayed the same. So are they becoming increasingly critical? What do we think? No, they're not, because the number of people saying bad things is going down every time. So they're getting less and less critical every time. So that's going to be a no. The next one, library and internet usage is the least priority. Well, if we take a look here, library and internet is like in the middle. The least priority would probably be hardship loans. So that's going to be a no. And finally, let's take a look at the last one. So the students became increasingly less engaged. What do we think? Yeah, so loads of people saying yes, a couple of people saying no. Now, the reason why you're going to say yes is because you can see the number of people reacting goes down between the debates. So between 1 and 2 and 3, the number of people engaging by writing tweets goes down. So the answer to this is yes. Now, you could say, technically, there might be something else going on. Like it could be that just the number of people showing up for hardship loans was less, even though they were super, super engaged. But what you got to remember, for these ones, you are allowed to infer, and you're going to take these at surface level. So as long as the data backs you up, you're going to say yes. And so for 2 and 5, we're going to say yes for both of them because they're supported by the data. And someone said this nicely, Holly, it goes 16, 13, 10. Very good. So 16, 13, 10. Great. Now we are at 3:30, which means we have not that much time. I will just go through one of these questions because I don't think it's going to take too long, and then we leave decision making there. So let's take a look at this question now on arguments. And this is the last question from decision making for today. Now, Abdul Rahman, logic puzzles, please. There are quite a few left, but we also have to get onto situational judgment. So I might not do a logic puzzle just now. We'll do one of these because it's quick. The logic puzzles take a while. So we are going to move on to situational judgment after this. So just this last question for today. And arguments are one of the quickest ones. They take about 30 seconds each. So have a think, put it on the chat. And direct message it to me, by the way. Okay, so loads of people getting this right. And the correct answer here is going to be A. Now, how do we answer these questions? It's not about what do you think and whether or not you agree with it. So here, the correct argument could be either yes or no. You don't decide that in advance. What you need to look for are just these three criteria. So first one, relevance. Does it talk about each and every bit of the question and only the same stuff, only the same group of people? Like, for example, if this talks about older people, but this talks about mentally ill patients, that's not the same group of people. That's not relevant. That's too narrow. So B is not a good argument. Each and every aspect of the question, not broader, not narrower. So, like if we had a question that's about children and the option was children under the age of 5, that's not the same group. So, that's too narrow. That's not relevant. You're also looking out for evidence. So, if any of them mention evidence, that's going to be good. But obviously, if none of them have evidence, then that's okay. And if any of them are factual, then that's also good. So, if they have claims that you can verify. Now, we're going to talk about this one, and then finally, we're going to talk about what's maybe the difference between a fact and an opinion. So, for this question here, what we're going to look out for is read the question first and make sure you incorporate all aspects of this. So, we're talking about society versus family members, but also we need to refer to this idea of ultimate responsibility. So, ultimately responsible is like who's going to be responsible in the end. So it might be one person first and then another person, and that's okay. But we're looking for, in the end, like if nothing works out, who's going to take responsibility at the end? So who's ultimately responsible? And only A really talks about that, where it says family should come first, but if not, then society should be responsible in the end. Now, B, C, and D don't talk about ultimate responsibility, who should be responsible in the end. So A is the only real relevant one, and that's why A is the best option. So relevance is the most important factor, and evidence and factual are also good if you have them. So before we finish off decision making, last thing is, can someone tell me the difference between a fact and an opinion in the context of the UCAT though? And you probably want to put this for everyone so everyone can see. Subjective versus objective. That's the perfect answer. So subjectivity versus objectivity. It's not about something that is correct. Okay. So fact or opinion is nothing to do with whether you agree with it or whether you think it's true. Like we could have two facts here. We could have all dogs are black. So we have this is one statement, all dogs are black. This is the second one, killing is wrong. So we have two statements here, all dogs are black, killing is wrong. Now I can tell you that I think all 232 of you would agree that killing is wrong and that you've probably seen a white dog before. So you would say that the first one is false and the second one is true. But that's not to do with fact and opinion. So for fact and opinion, you need to separate out what you've remembered about like your own understanding. All we're looking for is subjectivity versus objectivity. So is it something that we can test using evidence? So this claim here, all dogs are black, is an example of a fact. It is a false fact, it's a disproven fact, but it's a fact. You can check. You can go and find a dog that is white and you can disprove the statement. So this is an example of a factual claim. When we have here killing is wrong, that's not something that you can test using evidence. Does that make sense? So we can't say killing is wrong is a fact, even though you would agree with it. Everyone would agree with it. You can't call that a factual statement. So that should give you an idea of the difference between facts and opinions. So if we look at this one, D, everyone has a life to live. This here saying everyone has a life to live is an example of an opinion. There's no way you can kind of test that. It's just someone making a statement which you can't check. If you compare that to C, C is something that is factual. You can check. You can see if society seizes involvement, do they have to stick together? Does that happen? Does that not? So fact is something you can check. But C is still not the right answer because C doesn't answer the question, which is about ultimate responsibility. And B doesn't answer the question because it's not about older people, it's about mentally ill patients. So I hope that makes sense. Relevance, does it address all aspects of the question? Evidence, does it have data in? Factual, does it use claims that can be tested and verified? Now, you're considering all these three factors together and you're weighing up the four arguments against each other. So it might be that none of them are perfect. Now, let's leave that there and move on to Catty, how is C a fact? Because you can check. We're saying if society sees involvement, families would have to stick together. Well, you can do that. You can seize involvement and then you can see, are the families sticking together? I'm not saying we should actually do that. It's just theoretically, it's something you could check. Now, we don't really have time for any more decision-making question types. So what I'm going to do is quickly talk about some situational judgment. And before we do that, I'll just answer one last question. So if we're given a factually incorrect statement, then it's probably not going to be the right answer if it's like verifiably false. And that's because it would then count as illogical. So when I said we have three criteria, relevance, evidence, factual, I guess we've also got a fourth one, and that's is it logical? So if something is like definitely false, like saying all dogs are black, that would probably count as illogical. So instead of ref, you could make it refi. It also has to be kind of logical.